It was just reported in the news this past week that a planet has been discovered circling the star nearest the sun. Proxima Centauri is the name of the star, and the planet is roughly the size of Earth, a little larger, but still the size which can conceivably be a rocky planet. It circuits its star in what is called the habitable zone, that is not so close as to have an atmosphere burned off, or so far away as to be an icy chunk. It is in the zone where liquid water could conceivably exist on its surface. Now, even if it is a rocky planet with water, it doesn't mean that it harbors life, much less intelligent life as we understand it. But it could conceivably. And people who search for extraterrestrial life are just thrilled about this. And already there is talk about sending a little spaceship, 4 grams is all it would be, there's all kind of different ideas about propulsion. It might have a laser sail and be pushed along by 100,000 laser beams from the Earth, and would require 100 gigawatts of energy, which is about the maximum output of the country of France. Maybe not. If we use more conventional propulsions, it could take upwards of 81,000 years to traverse the 4.2 light years it is to that planet. But they're thinking about ideas, how to send it. And even if we get past these technical difficulties, I mean, our galaxy is 100,000 years across. Even traveling at light speed is almost unimaginable. But even if we get past those technical difficulties, the question that begs itself is what message would we send if we could? I mean, there are right now gamma ray bursts that we're sending forth, and even some optical signals that are being sent at light speed across the universe, seeking to send out a message. But how much can you put in a telegraph message like that? What would you send if you could? There's actually a little precedent to guide us in this understanding. Before I get to that, I want to offer a disclaimer. This is obviously not my typical sermon. This is what happens when my wife sends me off on a vision quest by myself on my motorcycle. My last vision quest, just this past month of August, took me to several earthworks and mounds built by the Adena and Hopewell cultures that populated the Ohio Valley before we Europeans came to this country. And they built these mounds for a variety of reasons. Some were burial mounds, as the ones I visited in Chillicothe. One is in the shape of a cross out in the middle of nowhere, pegged to the cardinal points of the compass. Some were astronomical in nature. Some were ceremonial. The ones that interest me right now are the astronomical ones. The largest mounds and earthworks in Ohio are found in Newark, Ohio, and they're huge. They're huge. There are 3 major parts of it. One's a great circle, 1,200 feet across. 4 football fields could be put in it. And that itself could be placed in a rough square. And there's an octagon. What is that all about? Well, there was some thought maybe it was pegged to some solar movements. No. A professor from Erlan College came and discovered that it did have an astronomical purpose. And its sight lines along the various diagonal points in it point to the lowest place on the horizon where the moon would rise and set, and the highest points where it would rise and set. The moon is on a very complex circuit, an 18-year cycle, 18 plus years it takes for it to complete that cycle. And this earthworks predicts where it will rise and when over that 18-year period. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. The odds of it just being arbitrarily placed to do that, one mathematician calculated to be 40 million to 1. And that's before other earthworks that look the same shape, it's a bit smaller, but are oriented exactly the same way, around Ohio even. So you have to ask yourself, in light of all this, why? Why would a culture choose, if it was going to communicate something to its succeeding generations, why would it choose to communicate that? Especially when you consider the effort that went into this. And I highly recommend you go visit these things. You got to almost be boots on the ground. Walking around just the Great Circle alone, 14 feet high. These are people that didn't have Caterpillar earth movers to build this. They had what are, by our standards, crude digging tools, and they scooped it up in baskets, and they carried it, and they dumped it where it belonged. Why? This is something that wouldn't take decades or generations, but in excess, we're talking about hundreds of years at the time of Christ, some of them were built. Why go to that effort? Well, I mean, somebody like King Tut might have had an ego trip, but, and wanted to perpetuate a name. They didn't do that. There's no burials at this mount. They chose to communicate to their succeeding generations at great effort some astronomical observations. Back to why this arcane knowledge at this great effort. I have a theory. The indigenous peoples of this world at that time did not have a written language, which is not to say they were stupid any more than Stephen Hawking is stupid because he can't talk. He may be dumb, as that term used to be understood, but he's not stupid. And they weren't stupid either. And what they chose to communicate was highly technical, mathematically, and in other ways. They observed something in the heavens, and they wanted to preserve this for succeeding generations. Like the message extraterrestrials would send across the light years. What was this message that they would send to the future? Because a lot of the things that they made, arrows, were made out of wood, feathers, flint arrowheads have remained. Everything else is gone, has quickly returned to the dust from which it came. But the earth remains. Mounds remained. At church camp, we have a benediction that speaks of the eternal hills. They remain. They use them to communicate this particular knowledge, that the universe is orderly. The universe is not chaotic. It is not random. It is not arbitrary. It has order, which means to say that there are cycles that repeat themselves that allow us to predict certain things that are useful. Our text talks about the sun's rising and setting, and if you know about equinoxes and solstices, you can determine when to plant a crop, when to harvest it. It's useful. They noticed that all the stars moved in the night sky around one that didn't move, the North Star. Very handy, because then you can infer the south and the east and the west. And if you're traveling, you can navigate by night without visual reference. These are useful bits of knowledge. It's useful to know that there is order in the universe. Because if there is order in the creation out there, you can infer that there is order in the creation that you and I occupy, the lives that we live. There are causal links, spiritual laws of cause and effect, that if we know them like we know the cycles of the moon, we can predict certain outcomes. Rod Stewart sang a song once. The lyrics went, "I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger." I might have done things a little differently. I might have made some other choices. I wish that I knew then. Well, I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger. Okay. And the Hebrews they did have a written language. And there were people that saw how life played out over time, who learned a few things from being around. And they passed these bits of wisdom on, and they collected them and found commonalities. And the wisdom of the aged was preserved over time as the wisdom of the ages and passed on. They too viewed creation as an orderly process. You notice our text for today begins, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands." It's not chaotic, it's not random, it's not meaningless. It has order, it's predictable. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. It's heard in France, it's heard in Spain, it's heard light years away, wherever any other critters happen to be. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. And the heavens have a voice of their own. They communicate things, as we have seen. Again, a North Star and the equinoxes and lunar cycles that are useful, that are helpful. But notice how the psalmist dramatically shifts in our text from talking about the glory of God that's displayed in the heavens, meaning the order that is found there. If it's chaotic, there's nothing glorious about it. But he shifts from talking about the heavens to the sacred scriptures all of a sudden. Dramatically, abruptly. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. By them your servant is warned. In keeping them is great reward. Just like the North Star can guide us in the direction we need to go so we don't get lost, the precepts, the laws, the ordinances, the statutes of God can guide us in life, can be useful, can teach us the wisdom of the aged and the ages, so that we do not go astray. By them your servant is warned. Solomon, I thought about trying to describe where these spiritual principles of cause and effect are in the Bible. Is like somebody asking you, show me some skin, and you go, well, where do I begin? Where do you begin? So, just off the top of my head, Solomon wrote something in the book of Proverbs. Pride goes before a fall. No, before destruction. And a haughty spirit before a fall. Now, you may have known somebody with a haughty spirit, somebody who thinks they're better than everybody else, more deserving than everyone else, pridefully, self-centered, self-serving at the expense of others. And you think, gee whiz, look at him getting away with all this. I should be a little less of a nice guy. I'd get ahead better than I am. That's what we are inclined to think. But those who lived a long time and saw how life played out for people began to pass along through the prophetic voices an insight that no, they don't get away with anything. They're setting themselves up for a fall. There is a law of spiritual cause and effect. When you see somebody acting in a haughty way, prideful way, don't think they're getting away from it with anything. This is a fall in the making, destruction in the making. Jesus echoed the same thing in the New Testament. In fact, there are places where three times he's quoted as saying this. He who exalts himself, the active verb, the action, I'm going to exalt myself, will be humbled. Now you become passive. Now something else is going to humble you, the Almighty. And he gives the converse to that too. He who humbles himself will be exalted. He said many other things. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Normally we think if I give you something, I'm out. You're ahead, I'm out. not in God's economy. Those spiritual principles, those laws, like the lunar order in the universe, there is an orderly life that we live. And if we understand the principles that govern this scale, like we understand the principles that underscore that scale, we can be warned, we can be guided. In keeping these precepts are great rewards. Today is Rally Day. You know, we've hopefully been off on our vacations and had a good time, and now we're coming back to work, we're coming back to school, some of us. Hopefully we're coming back to church. Here we will gather on the Sabbath day to explore God's holy word and to hear the guiding principles that are in it that can order our lives. Just like there is meaning in those mounds, there are mounds and mounds of meaning in God's holy word. And if we understand it, we can benefit by it. And our children will be doing the same in ways that are appropriate to their ages. A message has been sent to us across the centuries, light years away. From ancient times, a message has been sent to us. It is the message of salvation. May we have eyes to see it, and ears to hear it, and hearts to follow in all its ways. Please rise.